Hello everyone. So I just wanted to make the video that many of you asked for a few days ago about Evo Morales and why we do not want him in power. Now there are various reasons, and by the way, I'm making this video as I'm driving because I have no time anymore lately. I'm on my last 2.5 weeks of university studies and I graduate, so I really cannot continue missing my work and missing my assignments. I'm very delayed on the things I have to do. So anyway, let me just make this brief, and I'm doing this while I'm driving just not to lose any more time. So why Bolivians do not want Evo back in power? So we can split the reasons into various categories. First of all, observing the legal aspect and the legal side of things, we can start by saying that constitutionally, he's just quite simply not allowed to be president or to even be elected or even run as a candidate to be elected for presidency. So, under the Bolivian constitution, any president is allowed to remain in power for 2 consecutive terms. 2. Each term is 5 years long. Therefore, under the laws of our constitution, a president can only be in power for 10 years straight. Now, you might ask me, how come Evo remained in power for 14 years in that case? So what happened was that he already abused his power and changed, among many legislations and many regulations and kind of laws he and his party changed. Among those, he changed the constitution in 2008. So in 2008, he changed the constitution, he changed a few laws, a few things within it, and due to this new constitutional law, or little like switches and little changes in the constitution, as well as the new name he set for Bolivia, which he changed from the Republic of Bolivia to the plurinational state of Bolivia, due to the justification that Bolivia has many indigenous people and different indigenous tribes. Therefore, we have to be inclusive in our country's name and employ the plurinational, many nations within a nation, the plurinational state of Bolivia. So due to that, in 2008, when he got reelected, he claimed that it was not his second term. His second term was like his first term under the new constitution. Therefore, he could be elected again under the new constitution for a second term. So he claimed that the first term that he was in power did not count. Okay, so that's the first abuse of power that you can observe, and which is clearly exemplified by his change in the constitution, trying to remain in power indefinitely, etc. So then in 2016, Evo Morales went ahead and he did a referendum where he asked the people of Bolivia if we wanted him to remain in power and to be able to be re-elected for another term. And so this was not only for him to have the ability to be re-elected, but for him to change the constitution for indefinite re-elections. Therefore, he could remain indefinitely in power if he was always re-elected. And his plan, of course, was to continue doing endless amounts of fraud and fraudulent elections, as he did on October 20th, 2019. And his party, of course, did. So the plan was, of course, to remain indefinitely in power, as Maduro is remaining currently after so much fraud in the electoral process as well in Venezuela. So anyway, moving on, 2016, he makes this referendum. The big majority of Bolivia votes no, to his huge surprise. So he, of course, is extremely disappointed. And he decides that the referendum cannot count. The referendum, he claims, is not representative. Therefore, he goes to the Supreme Court of Bolivia, okay? And of course, the Supreme Court is composed of judges that he chose. He handpicked these judges and put them in the Supreme Court because that's how justice works in Bolivia. Unfortunately, this party, the MAS, which is the movement towards socialism, which is the party of Evo Morales, throughout their 14 years in power, what they did was to grip a hold of the judicial power, the legislative power, and the executive power, giving them complete power over absolutely everything. I'll go into this further in my next video when I talk about the Forum of Sao Paulo, because this is part of the strategy of all of these political parties that pertain to the Forum of Sao Paulo. And all these political parties that are across Latin America and that want to reach the same end goal, which is authoritarian rule of a country. Now, going back to Evo. So he goes to the Supreme Court, which is composed of judges that are handpicked by himself, and he tells them, it's my natural right to be able to be reelected. Therefore, the referendum doesn't count, and you have to tell me that I'm allowed to run for re-election and to remain in power. So of course the Supreme Court says okay. And Evo, therefore, is granted, supposedly, legally, he's granted the ability to run again in 2019, although that was completely illegal under our constitution and, of course, unconstitutional. So he runs for elections in 2019, performs the most immense fraud that we all saw. If you were following me during that time in October, I am sure you have seen how I'm sure you have seen how literally the fraud was not only electronic, the fraud was just a complete manipulation of votes in all possible senses. Literally the people that were working for the electoral court and such, the ones that were supposed to transport the ballots from the places where people voted, so these were many like public institutions, so they were supposed to transport the closed and sealed ballot boxes to the tribunal where the count is performed, the final and official count is performed. So as they were transporting them, people literally videotaped them, opening the boxes, unsealing them, taking out the votes, you know, throwing those out and putting in new ones, fake ones, all for Evo. So that was what happened in Santa Cruz, for example. There are so many videos and examples of that I had posted on my Instagram stories and such. Then in Potosí, for example, they found like a private home, an entire private property that was being guarded by the military. And so people started wondering why. Therefore, Pumari, which is the civic leader in Potosí, he got in there. And many people, of course, like they fought with the police, with the military to get in the house to see what was going on in that house and why there was so much protection. So once they got in, they found out in that home, they had prepared, previous to even people like voting, they had prepared ballot boxes that were going to replace the real ones. So these pre-prepared ballot boxes were filled 100% with votes for Evo Morales. Can you imagine that? Yes, I am not lying to you. I have videos of this. So imagine the fraud, the fraudulent activity that these people did was not only like electronic with hackers and such, because that also existed, and also like different like logarithms they used to switch votes electronically, but they also did it manually with the people they paid to perform these types of fraudulent acts to help them. And of course, they prepared it months before, they prepared everything. And on top of that, we also found out how the dead voted, the absent voted. So for example, myself, I was supposed to vote in Miami. They did not allow me to due to some issue they had. And as it turns out, when the votes came out, and you can look it up online, I looked my passport number online, and I had voted in Santa Cruz apparently when I'm actually in Miami, and I didn't go back to Santa Cruz. So how is that possible? Then many people's grandparents also apparently voted, even though they have been, you know, they've been unfortunately deceased for many, many years. So imagine, the fraud was absolutely enormous. of a massive and just such predominant magnitude that it's like unimaginable. On top of that, recently we also found, and I even proved this myself by downloading these actas, which are like the ballot pictures. So on the website, even where you have all the information of all the votes, they also have pictures of the ballots, like pictures of the votes from each kind of district. And so these pictures are supposed to be taken, of course, after people vote and posted on the website for transparency. So people started downloading these pictures because they're supposed to be open to anyone that wants to see them. When you download them, you can also download them and put them to get examined by an app that tells you the mega data of the picture. So it tells you when the picture was taken, for example. Remember this, the election was October 20th. I downloaded a picture, many actually. I downloaded some of these pictures, checked them with an app that checks the mega data of the pictures, and the app told me the photos were taken and created on October 15th at 6 a.m. I can send you guys the proof of this as well, as I have it on my phone. So just imagine that. Imagine the magnitude of the fraud if all of that was employed. And there were many other things that we probably didn't even discover, because that is probably the tip of the iceberg. So that's another reason. Evo's abuse of power, his audacity to do such a huge fraudulent activity and such a huge fraudulent election and claim like he is the most popular candidate yet again, and how he completely stomped and oppressed and just stepped on the people's democratic rights through the referendum that he ignored in 2016, where people told him no. The majority of Bolivians voted no for him not to be able to run again. So those are key reasons from like a legal perspective, only looking at the legality through the Constitution, only looking at the legality through kind of those aspects. We can also look at the legality of things, observing his business activities, as you could call them, his illicit business activities that have been performed throughout all these years that he's been in term and that he's been in power. So, if we start to think about all that he has done, let's look at his past. Before Evo Morales was elected as Bolivia's president, he had already been, for many years, president of the 6 federations of Cocaleros, therefore of coca growing groups of, like, agricultural groups, basically. So, in Bolivia, there are 2 regions where coca gets grown. Los Yungas, which is like a tropical region close to La Paz, and the jungle of El Chapare. So El Chapare is close to Cochabamba, and if you've noticed in my recent videos, my recent posts, most of the violence currently is going on very close to Cochabamba, or in the outskirts of Cochabamba, as they try to take over the city and whatnot. So most of the violence has been happening in the outskirts of Cochabamba and around the city of Cochabamba, as these Cocalero groups, led by foreign militia, let me tell you that, have been attacking the city. So, going back to Evo. Evo was the president and still remained to be the president of the 6 federations of Cocaleros. So, as I've said in different videos and different posts previously also, these Cocalero kind of like groups and federations, it is said that in the Cocalero region of Chapare, it's like a country within a country. It's like a different nation within Bolivia, because they don't follow our rules, they don't follow our laws, they follow their own. And nothing gets through, nothing occurs unless they get approval of their leaders, their Cocalero leaders, the heads of all these Cocalero people. Unless the heads say yes, nothing gets done. Unless the heads tell them to do something, they cannot do it. And the president of all these heads, above all the Cocalero agricultural men, the head of all the heads has always been Evo Morales. So he, all his time in presidency of Bolivia, all his time in the power in Bolivia, he was also the president of the Cocaleros. So isn't there a conflict of interest there? Wouldn't you say so? I would definitely say so. So anyway, that's why he changed legislations to his convenience and to the convenience of the Cocaleros. That's why he benefited his own business, which involves the growth of coca. And that is why also he abolished the rules that Bolivia maintained of the limit of acres that can be used for coca growth. So just think about all those things. Imagine, previous to him, there were about 9,000 to 12,000 acres of coca growth. And these were mainly, the reason for these was domestic use. So like national use. So in Bolivia, the thing is, the indigenous people of Bolivia are used to, from, centuries ago, millennia ago, they're used to chewing coca leaves, or they're used to making coca tea and different things that include coca within it. But, one leaf, two leaves, chewing a few leaves, that has really very little of an effect. If you think about it, to make like a kilogram of cocaine, you need about 5 tons, I believe, of coca leaves. And they condense that to make, through the entire process, of course, to make the cocaine. So regardless, during the terms of Evo Morales, he abolished the laws of limiting the space in the country for coca to be grown. And he expanded the possibility of coca growth and the possibility of, areas where coca can be grown. He expanded it to reach the current state of 25,000 acres, 25,000 hectares, excuse me. He expanded it to the possibility of growing coca and the current coca growth throughout 25,000 hectares in Bolivia. So, if 9,000 hectares is enough to supply and to oversupply our national demand, what do the rest of the hectares get used for? We are talking about 16,000 hectares of surplus growth. Do you realize that? So, that I think also tells us what he was using his coca leaf growth for, what he was kind of planning for the future of Bolivia's, coca industry. And of course, that only got reinforced when he, in 2014, built the international airport. He built the international airport of Chimoré. Chimoré, a city that has 3,000 inhabitants. 3,000. And these inhabitants are, I'm sorry to say this, but they are very humble people. They're people from the jungle of the Chapare. They're people that are very used to this kind of village life. They don't really travel internationally, one would suppose. And so he builds the best international airport in the whole country in the middle of the jungle. It's almost impossible to even get there because there are not, roads that are easy to use to attain this airport. And it's so far off from all the big cities that it really serves zero purpose. Even, I have been researching a few more things about this airport. This airport has no international flights. The only flight that they have that goes into the airport and out was the only flight that was supposed to be supplied to this airport was a flight that would fly to Cochabamba and back. Cochabamba is like 20 minutes away from Chimoré, and so the flight never even got inaugurated. Do we see how ridiculous this really is? The airport, it is said that the airport is constantly guarded by military forces. Why is there so much guard? And of course by guerrilla forces. Now, in recent documentaries and in recent reports, some people have come out with kind of inside information, and they have revealed that they saw Venezuelan planes coming in with arms, for example, and leaving with cocaine. They have seen Venezuelan planes coming into Bolivia, into directly the Chimore International Airport, which has, by the way, the biggest and most elegant and greatest landing strip in all of Bolivia for 3,000 inhabitants that don't even use airports. So insider kind of people that used to be either pilots in the Air Force or pilots in you know, commercial flights and such, they have started coming out with the reality of the case. And they started saying, you know what, we saw that Venezuelan planes were coming in with arms, Mexican planes were coming in empty and leaving full of cocaine. You know, they saw apparently planes going into the Chimore airport, which is so guarded by the military. They saw planes from Spain, from Mexico, from Cuba, from Venezuela, from Brazil, from so many different countries. And of course, what have they been carrying? I'll leave that for you guys to guess. So, I mean, that just brings us to the absurdity of a lot. And on top of that, the airport was made with state money. Let's not forget. The airport had a cost of $50 million of taxpayers' money from Bolivia. And it serves only the purpose of Evo's drug trafficking business. And it only facilitates the drug trafficking route, which they call La Ruta del Alba, the Alba route. And so, of course, one can tell all the different kind of discrepancies and, you know, odd aspects of all of this. Therefore, that brings us pretty much to the conclusion of why we do not want Evo back in terms of the legal aspects. So I hope that concludes it in that sense. Now, other than that, it has come out that a lot of his rhetoric, a lot of his speeches are just completely false. Throughout all his mandates in power, he always spoke, for example, about La Pachamama, Mother Earth. If a man that is so devoted to Mother Earth and so devoted to the indigenous values is speaking of it so much, then how could he let 6 hectares of our country burn, completely burn to the ground to forest fires? Some of the most fertile regions of Bolivia, the most sacred parts of our Amazon and of our Chiquitania, which is our dry forest. How could he allow for that to happen if he loves La Pachamama? Let me tell you this, for indigenous people, La Pachamama is like their god. La Pachamama is Mother Earth. It's like the most sacred part of life, really, in an indigenous person's perspective. So how could an indigenous man who is so devoted to his indigenous roots and such, how could he let that happen? How could he just burn off who he claims to be the most sacred and the most powerful in all of our existence? This brings us to a lot of questioning that we can do. Questioning in terms of who this man really is. Is he even devoted to his indigenous roots that he claims to have so strongly within him? Is he devoted to his speech? Is he devoted to even his beliefs as an indigenous man? Definitely not. This is a man that has a lot of self-interests. This is a man that, you know, wants to benefit himself and has been benefiting himself and his business throughout all these years that he has been in power. This is a man that claimed that he would help the indigenous people in such in such ways that, you know, really attracted the popular vote towards him. And that's part of the Foro de Sao Paulo as well, which I'll explain in my next video. But that was the strategy, truly. Although the true Evo Morales came to light as time went by. And this is a man that also spoke so much about imperialism and, you know, being against the powers that always abused Bolivia and abused our resources. Okay, great. I absolutely agree. We have to keep our resources. We have to use them efficiently, properly, and in a way that will benefit our country and not someone else, and not our self-interests as people, but our interests as a nation. And this is always what he talked about. So how come he's been giving our lithium away almost as a present to China? How come he's been benefiting China in such great and lengthy ways and not even paying the royalties? He hasn't been, you know, the government has been taking and extracting the lithium lately, giving an 80% of the lithium and of the revenue to China and exporting it straight to China, and leaving like no royalties for the county and the department where the lithium is taken out of. Can you imagine that? Why, like, one really has to think about all the aspects of this man's like claims, his speeches, and his doings to truly come to the conclusion of what we quite clearly see today as a man that is just full of lies. And we see that today as well, as he constantly claims that there was a coup, which is a lie, that, you know, he is the victim, which is a lie. He is the richest man in Bolivia. I mean, he is the head of the narcotráfico in the world right now. He is supplying the world with 30% of the cocaine that is used in the entire world. Like, can you imagine that? So this brings us to really the conclusion that Evo Morales is not a fit leader at all. He has no national interests in mind. He has self-interests in mind and self-benefit in mind, not national benefit, which is what presidents and leaders should have in mind if they want to help our nation. That's the most important and key thing. So yeah, I mean, I think that kind of concludes it, doesn't it? If you guys have any questions, please do let me know. But legally, he cannot be a president again. There's no way. And looking at it from a perspective, like a looking at everything he's done retrospectively, one can tell that his rhetoric has always been just completely false. You know, the indigenous people, right now he keeps saying that the indigenous people are with him. Really, are they really with him? No, they're not. Him and his party and his people have been threatening the indigenous people with burning their homes, taking away their land, taking away their agricultural land, all of this. And I even posted a screenshot of a message a very sweet girl sent me of like a week ago. And her message was just asking and looking for, I think, emotional support. Because she told me like her dad is a cocalero. He's one of the men that only works in the agricultural side, that only grows the coca leaf. Therefore, he has really limited resources. You know, let's go back to that for a second, because I don't want people to start confusing things as well. Like, it's not like all cocaleros are rich and they're narcotraficantes. Like, no, cocaleros are not narcotraficantes. Cocaleros are not drug traffickers, not all of them. So how it goes, as I was saying, like, it's a country within a country. Therefore, within that structure of the federations within the Chapare, you find the president of the federations, which is Evo Morales, which is the head of everything. Then you find all the cocalero leaders. So they're the ones that are pretty wealthy because they're making a lot of money out of this whole illicit business. And then below them are the people that are doing what is actually allowed, which is just growing coca leaves. And those people are the abused people. Those men that just grow the coca leaves and they're all year long just growing them, watering them, you know, plowing them, you know, taking them out of the land and putting them to dry out. Those men that do the manual labor are the abused men. Do you know how much they make per year to grow all that coca? While the heads are making millions Do you know how much those cocaleros that actually grow the coca make? They make about $2,500 per year. Per year. $2,500 per year. And if they're lucky, if they grow a lot of coca that year, and if their if their leaders make like extra revenue, maybe if they're lucky because they grew more and they worked harder, maybe they'll make $5,000 per year. And that's if they're lucky. So those people really live on a very thin margin, and they do what they can to survive. So this girl, she's the daughter of one of those men that's out in the fields growing coca for these abusive leaders that only want to use the coca for one thing. And we know very well what that is. So this girl sent me a message explaining it all to me. And honestly, I'm not gonna lie, I feel guilty, because for some time I thought, oh, the cocaleros, they're all bad. They're all part of this whole narcotráfico negocio. Like, they're all part of this whole drug trafficking business. No, they're not. Not at all. The ones in the bottom, they're just doing what they can to survive. And unfortunately, in that region of Bolivia, there's not much you can do. Like, the industries are very limited. And if you are from like that kind of social strata, you're not gonna make money like by planting pineapples. No, what's wanted there is coca. So if you're gonna be an agricultural man, you have to plant coca to make a living and to be able to feed your family. So this girl, she's the daughter of 7, okay? So her and her entire family, they've been struggling for a long time. Her father is a cocalero that works in the fields. And she told me how he is scared for his life because he was forced to go to those protests where those Venezuelans and those militia from other countries were literally shooting men, Bolivian cocaleros, Bolivian, just like, you know, those people, oops, Bolivian agricultural men that just grow the coca. They were getting shot as if they were just animals. So he was forced to go to one of those protests, and to 2, and to 3. And they forced him by telling him, if you don't go, we're gonna fine you 200 Bolivianos per day. Let's stop there and think for a second. 200 Bolivianos. How much is that in dollars? It's almost $30. Let's think again. This man is making approximately $2,500 per year. It's nothing. Therefore, per month, he's making about $200. $200 per month. What is $30 out of 200 per month? That is a huge amount, you know? I mean, they were gonna take away $30 off the paycheck that he makes to basically be enough to just feed him and his whole family. So, of course, it's impossible. Those $30 that they were going to take away from him each day is like more than a week's worth of work that he makes. So it's truly impossible. These people, they're like abused and they're forced and obliged to go protest. And on top of that, not only to protest, to risk their lives, because they become like the animals that these people shoot just to pretend that there are victims because Evo is not there. So going back to that, she told me he refused, and they told him, okay, they will fine him, and if they will continue fining him, and on top of that, they will take away his land. On top of fining him, they will take away his land that they basically lend to him just to work on the coca and to grow coca leaves. So they were threatening him of taking away the only peace in his life that allows for his and his family's existence and survival. What choice do these people have? And I'm saying this and I'm kind of emphasizing this because I also don't want all of us to think that cocaleros are all bad. They're really not. They're just people that are doing what they can to survive. They're humble people that, you know, live in a region where that is the train of work that they must do in order to have food on their plate and to provide food for their families. So it's really heartbreaking what's going on. And to add to the Evo thing, why we don't want him back, he is the one causing all the deaths every single day since he left. He is the one causing complete havoc and complete turmoil and complete violence and destruction in our country. If you have not realized that yet, then please open your eyes a little wider. I hope you saw the video that I posted today about a Cocalero leader on the phone with Evo Morales and receiving orders from Evo about, you know, seizing the cities and, you know, causing this like fencing around them, not to allow any food to get into the cities, telling the Cocaleros to go and, you know, cut out the gas from the cities, cut out vital needs, cut out basic necessities, making people just starve basically until there's no choice but for him to come back to pacify. And that's what he keeps saying lately. He keeps saying that he wishes to go back to Bolivia to pacify the people, to pacify the situation. Let's be realistic. There's nothing to pacify if he's the one causing the violence. So I think that's extremely important for all of us to understand. Evo is not only a wannabe dictator because he wanted to instate and install a dictatorship in Bolivia so that he could just manage his whole business and his transactions with Venezuela, Cuba, Brazil, Nicaragua, Argentina, with so many different countries around the world, really. Even Spain, Iran, Russia, China. So he wanted to remain in as a dictator in order to manage his deals and his business dealings in such a swift and easy form and manner. And on top of that, he's a man who's involved in some of the most illegal and illicit activities that could exist, as is drug trafficking. And it's a man that just does not respect his people, does not love his people. He claims to love the indigenous people. No, definitely he doesn't. He's burning their homes right now. He is telling the people that follow him to just oppress them until they subdue to his orders. How can a man that claims to be in touch with his people, that claims to love his people, abuse them in such manner? How can a man that claims to respect La Pachamama, which is the motherland, our earth, how can a man that claims to respect our earth allow for the whole... That's about the size of Uruguay. That's like a whole country just burned. And you know why he let that burn? Because he wants to make Bolivia into... He wants to make the entirety of Bolivia to become agricultural grounds for his coca leaf growth. Let's be honest. He wanted to move his indigenous people to start growing coca leaves everywhere, to expand his business and industry and make it even more, you know, more affluent than it already is. On top of that, let's not forget that when you grow coca in a certain region, you can only grow it 2 or 3 times. Not even. I think it's 2 times that you can grow coca leaves in like a parcel of land. You can grow it twice, therefore 2 years basically, two cycles, and then the land is destroyed. Coca, the coca like grain and the coca leaf, the way that it grows, it just takes away so much of the fertility of the ground that then it leaves it infertile forever. The land never fully recovers. It might recover slightly, but it never gets back the fertility it originally had. And that's why Evo Morales keeps expanding the grounds of possibility of coca growth. Because the grounds that have been used can no longer be used. And as the expansion happens, he's destroying Bolivia more and more. And he's destroying our land. So from this, I think you can understand that legally it's impossible to have this man in power because it's just completely unconstitutional. And he's like a person that does not respect laws, does not respect rules, abolishes laws and legislations to his convenience, etc., etc., etc. 2, it's a man that's involved in the most illicit types of activities that you can imagine and fathom as a human being. So how could it be possible that a man involved in such illicit dealings, how could it be possible for a man like that to be the president of a nation? A nation that wants to develop and progress and evolve. It's impossible to have a man like that in power if we wish to progress in the way that we could. Because Bolivia has a lot of potential. That is clear. We have so many resources. We have an abundance in resources that is unimaginable. And we have resources of all types. And then this man's exploiting all those resources and giving them as gifts to China and Russia. No way. It's impossible to have a leader in power like that, who exploits everything and lies blatantly to our population and abuses our people and abuses our land on top of that. So I think those 3 categories can really fit the full picture of who Evo Morales is and why it's unacceptable to have him in power for Bolivia. This man has no quality of a leader. And this man has no honorability as a human being. No ethics, no values, no respect. And he's ruined our country enough. And for those that claim that our economy has never been so good, please don't look at just the fake numbers. Look at our deficits. Look at our balance sheets as a country. It's unbelievable how much people are missing and how much they can claim and just repeat what the government says. Of course they're gonna say that. We are in the largest deficit ever. So let's be real. I think that concludes it. Thank you very much. And I'm almost home.